Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And today's episode is brought to you by the Martin SC13E Koa. The SC13E, with its patent-pending Shore-aligned neck system, gives you full access to all frets so you can comfortably reach those high notes. It's also equipped with a new low-profile velocity neck carve, and its asymmetrical body shape provides balanced output, giving you more gain before feedback, making it great for the stage. But the SC13E is still a Martin, so it sounds just as impressive unplugged. If you'd like more information on the Martin SC13E, please visit maurysmusic.com today. What's happening today, Spoon?
Well, I'm very excited about the SC13E, I have to tell you. Some people may know that I actually wrote the article. Some people may know I wrote the article on that in the Martin's journal, annual journal that they do when that model first came out. I was, being an old-fashioned Martin guy that I am, I was skeptical about the SCs when I first heard about them, and I got to see various research and development, guitars that they were experimenting with, and I have to say, I was really pleasantly surprised at how successful those 13 fret SC models are, with, of course, the 13E Koa being the first one they ever came out with. I'd like to also say this program, in addition to the SC13E Koa, this program is also brought to you by Spoon's Technical Difficulties, as we have to tape this one with me wearing just a normal USB headset because I've had some equipment malfunctions in my normal microphone and preamp and all that stuff is not available for this one. So hopefully I'm still coming through okay and will sound good enough to proceed on this podcast that's going to actually have a couple different topics. For one thing, we are taping this shortly before we go off and reunite at Martin Fest in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, with the hotel being technically in Bethlehem, and that's just coming up shortly. But we're going to do a little bit of a Martin Fest preview at the end of the program so we can end this program on an upbeat, fun note.
Wow, it sounds like between last week and this week, you started running the whole show by yourself.
You will respect my authority.
Yeah, right.
That was a great impersonation of me, I have to say.
Well, you mentioned good enough. If they ever write a book about Maury's music, it's going to be called Maury's Music, Good Enough. So I think that's perfect. I don't think there's any reason to strive any better. If we had better sound last week than the week before that, it was probably more accidental than produced. But I shouldn't talk down about ourselves. We put lots of time into this. And if we have to have one of those weeks where you're going to be Mr. Headset, it's going to happen again at Martin Fest. If we play our cards right, we're going to sit down with at least one or two friends, try to put some podcast episodes together there, and that's going to be Headset City. So maybe this is a good week to experiment with that idea anyway. But I do think today's topic, at least one of the topics, I'd like to talk about Guitar Center. And if for no other reason, it seems like you and I are the last two YouTubers who still have not talked about Guitar Center. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pike all the time, and if you just do a search for anything with acoustic guitars, electric guitars, guitar news, and you type it into a YouTube search bar, I almost guarantee you're going to see someone's done a video, whether it's in the past couple of months or the past year or so. There's almost always news breaking that Guitar Center is getting rated and reviewed lower and lower and lower as far as Moody's and those businesses that do the really technical stuff that we're not going to get into. I want to start by saying we are not offering credible commentary on the legal or financial side of any of this. The impending doom that we're going to talk about, we're just interested in a healthy conversation about two things: the possibility of a retail future without Guitar Center in it, and the impact that future could have on guitar players, buyers, other stores, and manufacturers. So it hardly matters if we're right to assume that Guitar Center is really, really in big trouble. But let's get the conversation going back and forth, not just with each other, but I'd love to see some YouTube commentary. If you are watching this, whether it's in real time or if you see the replay somewhere, if you know or have an interest in the subject of Guitar Center and them having a real hard time right now, where do you see it going? And if it were to happen, I'm extremely curious as a guitar player, as much as a music store owner, as a Martin and Blue Ridge dealer. There are so many moving parts here that feel like in the short term and the long term could look either completely bleak or maybe even advantageous to some facets of this. And I'm really curious to see what the experts know. So that's not the important part today. But Spoon, let me just start by asking you, do you have any Guitar Center experiences or stories that you may have thought to talk about? If somebody was to ask you, have you shopped there? Do you have a history working with them?
Oh, well, yes, actually, several stories. So before we get there, I noticed that you had mentioned people putting in YouTube comments. For those of you on other platforms listening to this podcast, if you see the YouTube version, you can actually leave comments and that other people can read and respond to and all that. If you're not on YouTube, you can also reach out via email to Maury's Music. We'd still love to hear any comments you have, suggestions of future podcast topics, all that kind of stuff. You can also, do that by reaching Maury's through, which is the best email address for them to write to?
Support@maurysmusic.com.
Very good. Well, I certainly support Maury's Music, and I have supported, Guitar Center in the past. I have to say right up front, the Guitar Center has been the butt of jokes over the years for many years of, in that Wayne's World sort of thing that you're basically going to go in and get a bunch of teenagers playing Stairway to Heaven, though I'm sure teenagers don't play Stairway to Heaven anymore. I'm not sure what they would play now. But and also the idea that you're ending up with these sort of surfer dudes who don't really know what they're talking about, bottom feeder retail guys, but I can speak from experience that there's lots of people that are employed by Guitar Center that do know what they're talking about and are love music and musical instruments. And in fact, we'll be seeing a good friend of Martin Fest that has worked at Guitar Center for many, many years. And I'm sure, if Guitar Center goes away, those people also will certainly be impacted, perhaps more than I will be. And I think Guitar Center is good for lots of people. It gave them a walk-in experience for strings or whatever if they had a Guitar Center nearby. In my case, the Guitar Center is all around New York City, and I can walk to one, but there are multiple ones. And on the other hand, at least back during the days when Martin allowed dealers to offer discount prices that were beyond what you would typically see advertised on the internet, Guitar Center also did not do that. And for people who didn't know any better, you were usually paying top dollar if you were buying a Martin guitar at a Guitar Center. In fact, my Brazilian Lawrence Juber model that I had bought back in the day, those things listed for 10. That meant that they were selling for $6,000 at 40% off at places like Maury's Music and other dealers who were allowed to, who could afford to offer a deep discount. And they came out shortly before the first Brazilian rosewood crisis, when Martin was about to get a big boat of Brazilian rosewood. And then it turned out that there was some question as to the validity of the paper trail, that this was truly above board CITES treaty Brazilian rosewood. And Chris Martin just said nope, because he's a huge supporter of environmental sustainability and all that, and saving the ecosystems around the world. And he just said nope, we're just not buying Brazilian rosewood from that source. And all of a sudden, they got rid of the Brazilian rosewood golden era guitars. And the Juber model that was selling for $6, listing at $10, was suddenly selling for $10 or more. And Guitar Center suddenly put a $10,000 price tag on what had been a $6,000 guitar the week before. Unfortunately, they also advertised as having the best prices and that they would match any deal. And so I walked in with a quote from another dealer in in another state, and they had to sell me my Juba at their normal cost. So that's one Guitar Center story that I'll start with. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly used them as a walk-in resource when I needed cleaning supplies, any of that kind of stuff, really from the pre-Maury's Music era. And I had other dealers. I mean, my dealer for years before I met you was Stan Jay at Mandolin Brothers in Staten Island. He was the guy
sure.
I considered my dealer, and Matt Umanoff. Matty and I also went way back, but so I didn't typically go to Guitar Center, certainly not when it came to buying guitars, and except for that Brazilian Juba, because they had one that had like a perfectly straight grain back and the most amazing grade A. It was literally graded 8 limited edition on this, back in the old days when they would write the pencil on the bottom of the soundboard in terms of how they rated it. So I bought that there because of the specific guitar. But
wow.
And I'm sure a lot of your listeners and customers that live near a Guitar Center have pulled in there when they needed to get strings or picks or looking at music books, whatever. So obviously, if Guitar Center really goes away, there'll be suddenly a pretty big void in certain communities that don't. Again, not like New York City. I also have Sam Ash, and I have Tom Crandall's store, and I've got if there's plenty of little mom and pop guitar stores here that aren't necessarily like Martin and Gibson dealers or Taylor dealers, but that could still service the community. My friends in Ohio, I can't say the same thing. They have to travel miles and miles and miles to get someplace, and if Guitar Center goes away, then a lot of those people will have to travel miles and miles more. So that's my first initial blabbing too long blab about that. What are your comments based on my comments?
Well, I wasn't expecting anything, real juicy, or you didn't disappoint me there, but you did make a comment earlier how, GC could be the butt of some jokes. If you're looking for that in this podcast, I'll save you some time. It's not going to happen. We're not going to use this platform to beat up on anybody. And I'm sure it's like herding cats if I tell you that I want to try and ask you to keep the responses civil in the comment section. I don't know that anybody would really listen to that, but we're not trying to stir anything up or get anybody to go ahead and light that fire where, hey, Guitar Center, this is how bad they are. A lot of people call us up and talk, Martin guitars and Blue Ridge guitars. And the people that do spend the time on the phone with us that have a Guitar Center, more often than not, they are complaining about when they go into the store, here's what's wrong. And it's one of those things where I don't know how Guitar Center can win in anybody's eyes, because if somebody's so used to being able to go to their local GC and play whatever they want and then complain on the forums later that night, I can't stand this store. They let anybody play anything they want. Well, I'm not that different about that when it comes to shopping for other things. If I want to go and buy something, I do want the ability to put it in my hands, and I also do want to buy something that wasn't in 95 pairs of hands. So it's either or. So if you're one of those people that really, really do value, buying from a guitar store and getting a pristine instrument, that might mean, this is my commentary, not speaking for Spoon at all, that might mean you're better served buying from a reputable dealer who keeps their guitars very clean, or like in our case, our guitars aren't played by anybody except me, because the time Spoon's here, he'll demo them, I'll demo them. The two of us are the only people right now that are getting our hands on something like that. The downside is you can't run through Coaldale, hop out of your car, walk in here and play whatever you want. So it's kind of an either or thing. So I just want to basically, whether I'm good business or not, I want to echo the sentiments of real people who know the difference. You can't go into a store, any kind of store, and play something or touch something and then complain that too many people had that opportunity as well. Either everybody's allowed to play it, and that leaves you the opportunity to really play before you buy, or you can't. And somebody made a comment on another video that I watched earlier where you could sort of have a little bit of policing, where if you don't just let anybody play anything. You might have guitars that cost $15,000 and they aren't by the door sitting on a stand without being locked up. Like, there are methods and measures you can take to keep the best stuff harder to get at. Maybe you've got to ask a salesperson to see that one, etc. I'm not going to get into all those details, but what I mean is if you came here looking for an opportunity to jump on the I'm bashing Guitar Center bandwagon, we're not driving that at all today. And I really do feel bad for any retail store, whether it's a Guitar Center or not, who lets people come in without an appointment, lets the floor traffic that walks through the door and plays whatever they want to play. That inventory, that's going to be what happens to that inventory. So it's a tough situation to be in. I don't know what to say about those customers who want both sides of that. But the only Guitar Center stories I really have since I've been a dealer, I've gone there on occasion to buy a guitar stand or a speaker cable. And I even bought my nephew maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I bought him a little Squire Strat when he was, starting to seem interested in playing guitar instead of drums. And these weren't major purchases, and maybe some people would say, why didn't I go and buy them wholesale somewhere else? It was just a convenience thing. And the times I've been in Guitar Center over the past 5-6 years, even though it wasn't major purchases, I don't have any horror story. Maybe they were slightly understaffed at times, and this is before the pandemic, but if I was in a guitar store, there are 2 that are within less than an hour and a half drive from me. And if I was in a Guitar Center, maybe 2014, 2015, I don't have any nightmare story to really, say on the microphone, except for there might have been times where I could say I wish there were more people in the store to wait on you and help you, and the line was a little bit long. But geez, I mean, that's really nitpicking, and I can't come here incredibly sound like that's something to cry about. So I think Guitar Center, in my specific experience as a retailer, has been fine. What we're talking about today, where they might actually not be around very long, Spoon, you mentioned you've used Guitar Center for things that like cleaning supplies. I wonder how many people would be really wrecked if Guitar Center wasn't around because they can't buy strings and polish, and how many people would be like, well, what am I going to do now? That's where I buy all of my expensive instruments. I'm very curious if Guitar Center is doing better on the retail floor selling parts and accessories or actually selling guitars themselves, and how many people are going into Guitar Center and playing guitars but not buying them.
Oh, yes. And just a comment on your comments after my comments. I think Guitar Center, I don't know if they're really the first, but they're certainly the first on the massive scale that took on the department store retail idea, and which also happened in electronics. So if you look at Best Buy, one of the advantages of Best Buy is that you're really looking at the laptops available at Best Buy at all of their stores. So the store in Seattle, if it has the actual laptop, they'll ship it to your local store in Denver, sort of thing. That and Guitar Center would do that with guitars. You could look on their high-end guitars on the website, and you weren't just looking at the ones in your town. So they would, they would move them around, and also as a big retailer, those days that you went in and had a long line, they couldn't really hire and have that many people on the floor to get that one really busy day when not every day was that busy, and that they had to run into those kind of logistical problems that big businesses have, and so they, like, I agree with you. I think overall they were very successful at it. The problems now are what you just said when it comes to the guitarists out there that have relied on Guitar Center and gotten used to it. Well, there was this chain, we didn't have them here in the East, but Mars Music was huge from Texas all the way to the West Coast and stuff, and they went away. And they probably went away partially because of Guitar Center's success. But you didn't have Mars Music in so many locations like you do with Guitar Center. And so it'll be interesting, but I have to say, I think it's really going to happen. The most recent thing that I heard, like you said, we're not financial experts. The most recent news that I saw in preparation for this was that right now, Guitar Center, their income is down so much in terms of, recovering from the pandemic, but also right now down so much that they can't make their interest payments on their current debt. And that, some people feel, is a tipping point, that despite the fact that they've had issues, and the pandemic certainly didn't help them anymore, like it didn't anyone else, made them worse, that this is a new thing, that they're reaching a new area that they may not be able to come back from. And so this isn't just a what if. This isn't just a what would it take for the Detroit Lions to win the Super Bowl this year kind of podcast where people can just magically come up with, all kinds of stuff that they do on sports podcasts all the time. And
says the Browns fan.
No one holds them accountable for their ridiculous predictions at the beginning of the season. But it's part of the fun for the speculation. And so speculating about this, it's not a pleasant topic, but it's certainly worth speculating about because it's a realistic scenario that Guitar Center may actually go away. So you and neither of us obviously are those kind of regular customers that rely on Guitar Center. So I am curious to hear about the man on the street who will be commenting on YouTube about that. What do you think about in terms of? Well, you are a guitar retailer, so you're a guitar retailer. You're not like a direct competitor of them, the way big companies like Sam Ash is. But what about the mom and pop stores out there? What do you think Guitar Center, if Guitar Center goes away, what would that mean for you? I mean, I think a lot of people out there would assume, well, that'll be good for your business because you're not competing with Guitar Center anymore. But I'm curious, what do you think about that? Or what do you think somebody in your position, is it going to have much effect, do you think, on Maury's music if that becomes the future?
That's a really, really fair question, and it comes up every once in a while. I mean, this is the break glass in case of emergency with Guitar Center has happened so many times now. It's almost like, are they crying wolf? And I know you're saying that it's coming, and it just feels like it's certainly not the first time I've ever watched a video that it said it's coming, and now it's going to be the first time I'm on a video saying that we're hearing this. But the first reaction one might think is, if there are 600 dealers out there for Martin, and one of them goes away, it's less competition. If one of those dealers is Guitar Center, and Guitar Center, I don't know how many stores they have, but if they all went down, the innocent thing to think is, well, they're not going to be fighting for inventory against us. They're not going to be fighting for sales against us. I don't know enough about business to get into the fine details, but that can't be that easy, and it cannot be accurate. I don't think Guitar Center going away is just a matter of everybody else who's vying for those sales gets to take them. And the same could hold true, and we'll get to a tributary of that question later, how that actually affects the end user. But if I'm going to Martin Guitar as often as I am to get inventory, and I'm trying to buy guitars, stock them, photograph them, demo them, and sell them, and so is Guitar Center. Once Guitar Center stops, you might think that is an improvement, but I have a feeling that that's going to be a lot more difficult to rationalize, because if Martin Guitar knows that they have dealer orders every NAMM show, they put the opening orders in, and then throughout the year, maybe one dealer like us, they might make orders weekly like we do. Some other dealer might make an order every 2 or 3 weeks. The point being, if Martin collects orders from Maury's, collects it from Guitar Center, collects it from the other dealers that are out there, and they kind of get an idea how many they want to build, it certainly does trickle down to the customer orders from the Maury's and the other stores and the Guitar Centers as well. Now, if Maury's ordered, say, $500,000 worth of Martins in January because we thought we needed $400,000 and we wanted to have extra, if we would start selling them too quickly, we'd have to order more and wait for them. The same holds true from the manufacturer down to the distributor. If Martin always expects Maury's to order $500,000 in January and we start ordering a lot less or a lot more, I would never even want to wish this headache on anybody as far as what Martin forecasts to build instruments and to buy all the supplies to do it. But to try to fast forward through this ramble, if the way things are going right now, Martin has a reasonable handle on what they need to build, what they need to deliver to dealers, that is going to be so thrown on its head. If Guitar Center just ceases to order anything, number one, Martin's already begun to build all the guitars that Guitar Center expects to receive this year. Where do they go? If they end up going onto Martin guitar shelves, that's a problem. If they end up going to dealers who have been begging for inventory for 10 months, that's a gigantic win. And right now, I mean, there's situations where we're waiting more than a year for most of our inventory. And I would have to think that if all the Guitar Center stores no longer pull from that pile, it's going to be beautiful because we're going to get guitars a lot quicker. I know enough to know that I don't know enough to feel like that's smart. That can't be good. There's no way Martin can get that news and say, oh, Guitar Center, now you're not taking this gigantic pile of instruments. No problem. We'll just give them to someone else. The other dealers have to be ready for them. They have to be able to afford them. They have to have room to put them somewhere. And what I don't know is all the Guitar Center customers, if they have a back order situation and they tell somebody next week, listen, we're not a store anymore. I can't get you that guitar. What are you going to do? Will every single end user just say, that's okay, I'll get it from someone else? Or will there be problems? I'm fascinated to understand what it's a gigantic ripple. It's like throwing a gigantic stone or a gigantic boulder in a lake, and it's going to go everywhere. What is it going to mean? I'm trying to find a professional way to say that I'm dumbfounded in how this could actually work where it's not interrupting something, because it just doesn't seem like the machine that Guitar Center is could just unplug itself and not be problems somewhere. I've no idea.
Well, it's a fascinating topic. I wish I had a better grasp on it. Anything we're saying here, we're supposing or imagining happening, and it may not happen, or if it does happen, I don't really know the scope of that as well. Like I say, I'm not one of the people that Guitar Center is the only shop that I can easily get to, and that definitely happens out across the country. But I have to say, I think just like really everything else out there, the pandemic really escalated the mail order business. In a way, lots of people who never used Amazon very often found themselves using Amazon every single day during the pandemic, and for things they would have never been ordering offline before. And as much as those of us who have the ability to have nearby merchants that we can support, hardware stores, clothing stores, whatever, Amazon's still a pull for a lot of people because their volume is so high that they can keep the prices down. And I think Guitar Center did that too, with some exceptions. Like I said, prior to the pandemic and Martin getting rid of the list price versus discount price and all that, and now there's just the price, suddenly Guitar Center has more competition than they ever had before. So while they were walk-in and mail order, now everybody's selling for the same prices that they are. And so I don't know how that changes the competition model at all. I don't know if that's to their benefit. I would think it would be to their benefit, because Maury's Music can no longer offer guitars at 40% off list, because now list is the real price. So you're now in that sense, you are in direct competition with them. So it's a very fascinating topic of, will it have a big impact on your business and other small dealers? And in your case, you sell Martins and you sell Blue Ridge, and you have some other peripherals and things that you sell. And for a while, you had you were selling electric guitars and things like that. But you're still in a unique situation compared to dealers that have 7, 8, 12 different brands of acoustic guitars and at all pricing levels. So. So that that puts you in a unique situation. So I don't really have an answer, direct answer of what will it all mean. But I'm still fascinated at the possibilities.
Yeah, and that makes me want to ask our listeners, whether you're listening on the podcast platforms or YouTube, if you're a Guitar Center employee, if you're a Martin employee, if you have some knowledge about the financial side of this and you see what's coming and how it's going to affect anything, if you're the kind of person that wants to participate, please consider, chiming in with your point of view. Again, we don't want any flames in the comments. We're not looking for arguments. We're not looking at all to point blame or to anything negative. If there's anybody out there that can take what we're talking about and make some sense of it, I'd love to read it. Again, if you want to reach out to us personally and not be public about it, it's support@maurysmusic.com. That's always invited. One thing that I'm sort of watching, and it goes back to the question I had earlier, where are people going into guitar centers and buying the guitars they're playing, or are they just playing them and leaving them there? Martin has begun to catch up on Mexico product over the past 10 months. I do wonder if most guitar centers sell more Mexico Martins or a mix of Mexico and USA, because right now, taking the emotion out of it and not being politically correct and not being polite, if Guitar Center stopped buying Martin guitars this month, and that meant all of their orders can bump up everyone else's, we wouldn't be waiting until January for a D28. We would probably get it much sooner. Might get it, this month or next month. If that's going to happen, is it, like right now, Martin's, emailing us once a week. We have a lot of Mexico product in stock. So if I want to get a DX1E, I could probably call them Monday and get it Wednesday. If I want a D28, like I just said, it's going to be a lot longer of a wait. I do wonder if Guitar Center stopped pulling from the pile, would that make Nazareth made 16 series, 15 series, standards, etc. a lot more available a lot quicker? And if that would happen, again, taking the emotion out of it, would Martin be just as happy to say, instead of selling these 600,000 guitars to Guitar Center, all these dealers that are waiting for this stuff, 12 months, 16 months, it all gets bumped up. Would those dealers be ecstatic, or would they be like, oh my God, I had no idea that was coming? Like with Maury's music, I would say, back the truck up. Like, I'll meet you. I'll be there in an hour. Some other dealer might say, that's great news, Martin, but I have too many Taylors and Yamahas and keyboards and drum sets coming this month. I still want to keep on my schedule. Again, this is the whole thing where if it worked out that Martin could divvy up all of Guitar Center's inventory to all the other dealers, I feel like if I keep talking about it, I'll start knowing, and I don't know. But I have to think that certain SKUs would be really welcomed in a lot of dealers, and certain other ones would. I mean, if they told us, hypothetically, next week, we have a lot of your winter guitars are ready now, take them. I would say, well, show me the list, because there are probably 13 I would really love to have before the end of this week. There might be 5 or 6 that I'm not sure I'm ready for. So it's not, without getting into some terms that we're not supposed to talk about outside of the Martin and dealer contract. It seems like I bet I would have a handle on what's going to go down, but I don't know. I feel silly to keep saying that I don't know. And the last thing I want to do is put a topic together for a podcast and just keep telling you that I don't know things, but I want to be transparent. If I had an idea, I would share it here, and I'm really stumped.
Well, since I was a kid, I used to say that the most used phrase in every language has got to be the equivalent of "I don't know," and because we speculate about things we don't know. But to go back to what what you started with was, is Guitar Center selling more Mexico product, as you call it? And for people not that familiar with the Martin's product scheme, the Road Series and the X Series are made at the Navajoa plant in Mexico. And so I guess I would say yes, only because I always remember when Chris Martin said to me that 50% of the acoustic guitars that are manufactured and sold around the world, and he's talking about flat top steel string acoustic guitars, cost $500 or less. Now, he said that to me maybe 10 years ago. So maybe it's now $800 or $1,000 or less. But we're still talking about the fact that Martin isn't even in business and in competition with half of the acoustic guitars being made and sold around the world. So that's something to remember. But that means to me that a company that works on the scale as grand as Guitar Center has, and whatever other, multi-state and maybe even multi-country dealers out there, like I guess Sam Ash, I can't think of any others right now that would qualify. They probably sell a large amount of inexpensive Martins, of the bottom end Martins, simply because there are more people walk into a guitar store to buy a guitar thinking they're going to spend $300 to get a good guitar, because they have no concept whatsoever of what goes into a professional level musical instrument. I remember someone, I won't say, thought that she'd just do me a favor and buy me a mandolin for my birthday. And she confessed this to me one night at some party when she'd had a little to drink, and she's like, do you know how much they cost? They're very expensive. I think she thought she was going to pay $250 to get me a mandolin, and just never occurred to her that she could spend $2,000 to own a mandolin, or a lot more. And so I think a lot of people, even people who are good musicians and love playing the guitar and stuff, their life, whatever it is, their disposable income, or if they have disposable income, has to go to so many things that, as much as they'd like to have a D28, they can't justify the cost. And that's where the Rhodes series comes in, because those are really good guitars for the money. So are the X series. My ex-roommate, Tola, the Englishman, Nigerian Englishman, he moved in with a DX1, and he went to a Guitar Center. He had people play it. People who worked there had other people play it. He listened to them. That was the one that he thought sounded the best. He knew nothing about Martins. He just played with, had somebody playing guitars for him in the same price range, and he said that sounded the best by far. So he was surprised when he moved in, and I had Martins and knew about them, and I talked to him recently. He's now lives in New Jersey, and he's still playing, and actually got pretty good. He likes to play a lot of the sort of modern progressive rock stuff on his DX1, and I think there's probably more Guitar Center customers, maybe a vast number more, that are those kind of musicians and those kind of buyers, spenders, than the ones that actually get to play, would actually buy something that's locked up in the glass case at a Guitar Center.
So hypothetically, if you follow that logic all the way through, if Guitar Center are mostly ordering Rhodes series, the X series, the Little Martins, and when they go away, that's what's going to become even more available at Martin. Well, that's already available. So ironically, if Guitar Center would stop ordering from the big pile next week, the guitars that Martin already has available are already there. So Martin would be stuck with, quote unquote, too many Rhodes series and X series. It wouldn't help push the pipeline of standard series and 15 series faster. So my idea of maybe that would help us get our stuff sooner than we were waiting for it now, long story short, would not be the quick ticket. So that's just, of course, it's all speculation, but
it's also,
but
it's mention. Relative too, because even if they're massive, even if I'm correct in my guess that this massive number of speaking Martin relative to Martin's overall catalog, lower priced guitars is what they really move. They have so many stores and so many customers that even if the standard series and modern deluxe series instruments are a smaller percentage of their overall sales, they're probably still more than any other dealer. With other than like Sweetwater, which is that's something else that is really an internet entity. I don't even know if Sweetwater has shops. I'm assuming they must have a store somewhere, but
yeah, they do have one huge store. But I see your point. That's a really good point. Even though they're going to be heavy on the Mexican product, it doesn't mean they don't order a metric ton of 16s and standards. So that I shouldn't go too quick to my other idea. You're right. They're still ordering more D28s than I'll probably order in 5 years.
However, it's all. This is again completely, totally off the top of my head speculation. Given the long history, which is now a long history of their financial problems, their debt problems. And I'm not I'm no economist, so I do understand how huge corporations operate in debt all the time, and some of them you go into bankruptcy and they never go away. They get bankruptcy protection and they work out the debt, and all the financial institutions make money hand over fist, and all the interest in selling the debt and all that stuff that goes on. I don't know that much about it, but I would be surprised, though. This has gone on for so long. I would be surprised if Martin and Taylor and Gibson and any of the other, and Paul Reed Smith, anybody who's a big player, is still providing them with the same number of guitars they did before things got rough. I would be surprised if they're not kept on a short leash, saying we're keeping you in business. Here's your products, but we don't know when the rug's going to be pulled out from under you, and what that's going to have, what that's going to mean for us. So maybe not. Maybe they're selling every bit as they're getting the same pipeline of products and guitars and keyboards and everything else that they sell and microphones that they always have. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of their bigger customers are a little wary of plying them with the zillions and zillions of guitars when their other customers are waiting an extra long time. So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. It would be, I may sniff around in Nazareth next week and, do some off the record talking with some people there just to see. Yeah,
well, pull me aside when we're nowhere near these microphones, because I'm going to be there too. But it's going to be a good time the next week at NazFest, and I think if I'm being a good co-host, and I want to try to say that I am, all this doom and gloom, it's been almost 40 minutes of just, all this stuff's going wrong. Would you mind if I try to throw another segment at you just to bring some levity?
Well, sure. But also, before we do that, we could move off of Martin entirely and go to the next little episode from my top 10 reasons to own a Blue Ridge guitar. Okay, well, just to review, the number 10 reason to buy and own a Blue Ridge guitar was their very cool parlor guitars, the little equivalent to like a 12-fret O-size Martin. And the number 9 reason to own a Blue Ridge guitar is their tenor guitars. Now, their tenor guitars are also super cool. There are some other tenor guitars out there that are affordable, but I think the Blue Ridge tenor guitars are very cool. And my friend Karen Hogue, who some of you may know from Fretboard Journal and Acoustic Guitar Magazine and all that, she has a Blue Ridge tenor guitar. She absolutely loves it. You check out some of her videos on YouTube of her playing her Blue Ridge tenor. And so if you're not familiar with them, tenor guitars are 4-string guitars. They were developed right when the steel string industry was taking off, and the banjo was falling out of favor with jazz orchestras and other kinds of music. And tenor banjoists were starting to want to play the guitar, so it allowed somebody to play in the tuning of a tenor guitar, but you could also tune them like a soprano ukulele, which basically means tune them just like the bottom 4 strings on a regular 6-string guitar, so D, G, B, E, and there are other tunings. Celtic musicians use a different tuning for tenor guitars, and so there's like the viola tuning. There's the bottom 4 strings of a acoustic guitar, and I forget right off the top of my head what the Irish Celtic guys tune their tenor guitars to sometimes. But cool instruments. They add a nice vibrant high end over top of in ensemble playing, and and are good for harmonizing. In other words, you can have a high harmony with a capo or without. When you're playing with other musicians. And I think when it comes to Martin tenor guitars, Martin made a lot of tenor guitars back in the day, and I think the most famous of them, and I feel so bad. I'm going to probably get ribbing for this at Martin Fest. I can't remember the guy's name right now, who was the tenor guitar player for the Kingston Trio.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
That's where a lot of people saw the tenor guitar, and that was an integral part of the Kingston Trio sound. So you had the D28 and you had the banjo, but then you had the tenor guitarist that put this nice high end ringing harmony out over top of the instruments. So Blue Ridge makes 3 tenor guitars right now. And do you have any tenor guitars? 3 types of tenor guitars, from the different levels. So do you have any Blue Ridge tenor guitars in stock?
Technically, yes. We do have the BR60T right now, but when they do make a BR40T, a BR40T CE, which is a cutaway with electronics, and a BR70T, which is a really pretty pearly version, but sadly the only thing we have in stock right now as we're taping this is the BR60T. It's like a Style 28 rosewood instrument, but we do have more on order, and from time to time we at least like to try to keep one mahogany, one rosewood in stock as often as possible. But they really are pretty cool. I actually started working out some ukulele songs about 4 or 5 months ago, and that gave me the nerve to try and work out some of the same things on what was the BR40T before we sold our last one. And then, like a lot of other things in life, once I sold that and it went out on a FedEx truck, I got too busy to do anything else and I forgot to go back to it. But I would agree. I'm very happy that you chose the Blue Ridge tenors as the number 9 reason to buy Blue Ridge. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, and just to point out that the 40 that he was referring to, those are mahogany, and basically similar to a Martin style 18 instrument, and the one that actually does come with a cutaway and a pickup. And then the 70 is the other high-end rosewood instrument with the pearl trim. So nice, different sound, and for people who like to experiment, and also they're very comfortable. They're relatively small guitar, and they're easy to play, slender neck and all that. So that's it. That's the number 9 reason to own a Blue Ridge guitar. Back to you, Maury.
Back to me. Okay, I'm in charge again. I think it's time for us to play 20 questions.
So I have to pick a Martin guitar that is available, still in production, available for sale, and Maury has to guess it in 20 questions, including up to 3 guesses of a model. So, Swami now has a Martin guitar model in his mind. You now have 20 questions. On the clock, go.
Is this guitar a dreadnought?
Yes.
Is this guitar a 14 fret dreadnought with a full body depth?
Those are 2 questions. But yes. And yes.
Okay, that's 2 and 3. I'll play fair. Does this guitar have a bound neck?
Yes.
Do I own this guitar? Personally?
No. Certainly not that I know of.
Does this guitar have pearl on the top?
No.
Is this guitar a D35?
No. That's 7.
Is this guitar an HD35?
Yes! It is in 8 questions. That's right. He got it right. You guessed it. The HD35 came out in the 1970s, shortly after I may have come out in the 1960s, actually. I don't remember now. The D35 came out in 1966. And originally it was gave them a reason. They needed to use up beautiful Brazilian rosewood that wasn't big enough to make a two-piece back. So they came up with the three-piece back with the center wedge that, so you have book matches on the side, and then you got a center wedge that's from a different, different log. And they looked gorgeous. They made them with quarter-inch bracing, which they referred to as double O bracing at the time. And in fact, the back braces were double O, the same size that they have on double O's. Nowadays, all Martins have those smaller back braces, but back then, the D35 was the first dreadnought to have those smaller bracing. And they went with the quarter-inch bracing because they weren't scalloping bracing at the time, and they were trying to get something that was resonant like the scallop brace Martins from the 30s, and without having to train their staff how to scallop braces. And they accidentally invented a whole new sound with that big, round, yet focused bass throb that you get from a D35 and real focused trebles. So then they came out with the HD35, it must have been 70s, when they went back to scallop bracing. So they came out with the HD28, first Martin with scallop bracing, dreadnought in since the 30s, and then they did the same thing with the HD35. They added the herringbone and really cool herringbone back strips on those three-piece back, and added scallops. So they have scalloped quarter-inch bracing, Indian rosewood, spruce top. I think it is has the most luscious bass response with that real echoey resonance. I don't think there's another Martin out there that has the same kind of amazing bassy and really over the entire tonal spectrum, that real lush vibrato resonance of the HD35.
I would agree. It's not just the bass strings, but the entire voice of that instrument just has a warmth and a big blanket in it. And I don't want to make it sound like it's muted or muddy, but there's something even warm about the mid-range and some of the trebles. The HD35 just seems to have this like soup about it. And if you like bassy instruments and you're not looking at the HD35, you're just being a fool.
And I'm thinking, when I say all that, I'm thinking of the big strummers and the big strum stuff. We know people who have that guitar who fingerpick or play lightly, like Mikey Bono. And when he's doing some of his, Beatle tunes and stuff like that, he gets a beautiful sound out of it. So it's not just this big, roaring monster of a guitar. But if you like big roaring monsters of a guitar, it's the first thing I would tell people to look at. If that's what you're looking for. But when you lay off and you play with finger picking, like I said, or light, you still get that good bass throb. So it's like having your own sort of bass player when you're playing those alternate thumb bass notes and stuff like that. So it's a very versatile guitar. So check it out. If you never played one, try to get your hands on an HD35.
Thank you very much for the always enjoyable episode of 20 Questions.
Nailed it.
Yes, you did. You did nail it, I have to say. So,
boy, am I going to be thoroughly depressed next time I get like a 20 or a 19 in that game, or like the one time where I just did not have enough questions and I never guessed it at all.
I wasn't going to say anything, but... Well, we're almost out of time, and so I think it's, since we've been talking about Guitar Center and the possible future without a Guitar Center, I think the elephant in the room this whole time has been, what does this mean for Martin? Because Martin is one of those dealers that has, I don't know if I'd say relied on Guitar Center, but they have certainly taken advantage of Guitar Center to sell an enormous amount of Martin product, whether it's guitars or peripherals and strings and all that. So, I don't know. I don't know if I wonder how this would affect Martin personally, financially, if they do they have a bunch of investments at stake, or if it's just projected sales at stake. What do you think?
I'd have to think that anytime a manufacturer has a customer as big as Guitar Center, if things start to go south or end up south, it's got to be problematic. And I don't mean to imply that Martin couldn't land on their feet or they don't have a contingency plan in place. I'm sure they know this video is like the 500th time this has come up. We can't believe that anybody at Martin would be surprised to eventually see it happen. So that said, there have to be so many people in the top brass at Martin that know if this is coming, what are we going to do? The people that I know there, they probably had this plan in place where if this would have happened 3 years ago, they know what they're going to do about it. I don't think it's going to be comfortable, and I don't expect it to be, anything minor, but they have to have something in place. What if any dealer, for good or bad reasons, had to completely stop ordering Martin guitars for reasons that are complete surprises? What if Sweetwater said, you know what, here's this crazy reason, I can't explain it now, but we can't buy any more guitars? Anytime somebody that big at any manufacturer, it would have to be really uncomfortable and strange. I'm going to watch it closely, and I don't necessarily think that Guitar Center syncing would sync Martin or would allow Martin to sync anyone else in the dealer network, but it's got to be a gigantic hassle. I mean, I'm sure it's just restructuring, and I would be willing to bet that the first thing Martin would do is announce to the rest of the dealer network, there's guitars we had projected that were going to them, now they're going to be available for sale. What should we do with them? And I probably know a little bit more than you do about the Martin dealer relationship, and after that,
Certainly.
I'm as much in the dark, really.
Well, I would say, however, you really put a silver lining on it when you were talking about the fact that right now you and other dealers are waiting a long time for standard series, 16 series, modern deluxe series, and I guess 15 and 17 series to some extent. And so this might be a big boon for people like you. And so maybe Martin would not take that much of a hit if they were able to move up. But you also pointed out, some dealers may not be able to, their cash flow may not allow them to take advantage of that. But that, I have a feeling, will be a good thing. If I'm right that there's an awful lot of Mexican-made Martin product that is suddenly going to become available, and they are going to have to, hold on to it. I don't know. I do know that Chris Martin said that they did very well through most of the pandemic, and that he had ended up with too much product because he didn't foresee there was a financial downturn there that he hadn't predicted, and they ended up with too much product. Well, that changed with the pandemic, and so I agree. I think Martin's going to land on their feet, and be interesting to talk to people about some of this this week. And I had promised at the beginning we were going to end this on a high note by having a little preview of Martin Fest. So if you're not familiar with Martin Fest, which would be hard to believe if you've been following us online, Maury and I met at the very first event that they now call Martin Fest back in 2002. And on a weekend, it used to always be in August. This year it's the last weekend in July. People descend on Nazareth, and they take tours at the factory on Friday or sometimes on Monday. Because they're closed on Saturday and Sunday. But then we get together at a big, beautiful pavilion in Borough Park there, which is just down the street from the factory. But it's got the public pool there and snacks, snack shop. They have a base, softball diamond there. They actually have a bigger facility there with real grandstands and stuff. And really pretty get-together place, have an open mic, meet up with old friends and new friends, check out everybody's Martin guitars and other brands of instruments that people bring. Saturday is Martin on Main, which is an all-day presentation on a stage in the city square, which is actually a circle, and in the town square, where people from the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum do sets, and I will be performing a set there at 4 o'clock, thunderstorms permitting. And I have a special guest who happens to be on this podcast with me that's going to be sitting in with me. So you can see Maury Spoon live this Saturday in Nazareth, Pennsylvania at 4 p.m. Sunday we go back to the park, but don't let us fool you. It's really about the all-night parties at the hotel. That's what really brings us back year after year. And the song circles that could sometimes last till 3 or 4 in the morning. So So that's what it's like. What are you looking forward to for Martin Fest this year?
I don't want to sound funny, but I was going to say almost exactly the same stuff, and I won't waste anybody's time. He's right about the evenings. If you can't be at all of Martin Fest and you only have enough time to go and do a little bit, get yourself to the hotel after dark, because it's just that's where everything is that I remember the most. I mean, it's so much fun in the afternoons, and of course, the Martin on Main. I'm very honored and thrilled to be playing with Spoon and some other friends. Not to take away from that stuff, but the people that go to those events and then they drive home, and then they read about what happened in the evenings, much later. Oh, it's such a foul taste in your mouth to find out what you missed out on. It's just so much camaraderie. I think most of the unscripted bumping into somebody you weren't sure was going to be there and see their guitar, and a lot of the major memories that I have were in the evenings. And I say that because, as Spoon knows, the very first year, I was too smart for that, and I drove down during the day. I'm only an hour from the factory, so I drove down to the festivities, drove home. The next afternoon, I went and did it again, drove home, and then only found out way too late that all the fun was at the hotel, and it really is that much fun. We haven't missed one in 20 years, so if you think we're just kind of invested in this, or it's kind of a good thing to do. Talking about a world without Guitar Center, I could not imagine a world without UMGF Martin Fest.
It's been 21 because they had to cancel the one, of course, over the pandemic. So the first one was in August of 2002, and so this will be the 21st. And so, more power to them, the moderators of the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum that keep this thing going, and we certainly appreciate it. So hopefully our listeners will maybe be able to make it. Some people will be coming to the very first Martin Fest this year, and there's new people every year. And you would, if you've never been and you'd like to come, you'll be shocked at how welcome you are. So think about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing Maury in person for the first time in a long time. And
thank you. Me too.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Looking forward to it big time. So, excellent.
Excellent.
Well, what he said. Guys, it's been so much fun. Thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate all your support. And if you're the kind of person that likes to put reviews together, please consider heading over to Apple Podcast and leaving a review for us. We might even read your review on the air. Johnny I writes, "Greetings from China. I've been listening to this podcast show on my way to office and home. It's a great show to learn about Martin guitars, and for me, a great option to learn English as well. I love Maury's hosting style and the jokes, and Spoon's endless knowledge about Martin guitars. Keep going, please." How cool is that?
Oh, I think it's really, really cool. I'm always amazed. I always say I have too much trouble with English as it is. So I've tried to learn French, and I never developed that part of my brain. So I have absolute respect for anybody who speaks more than one language, and English is particularly hard for people who are coming to it as a second language, because it's such a mishmash of so many other languages that it has so many exceptions and rules that make no sense whatsoever. Unlike Spanish, which the syntax and the rules all make sense. They don't have the kind of gobbledygook that English speakers have to put up with. But so great. That's great, Johnny. I'm really happy to hear from you from all that way, and we look forward to future reviews from other listeners.
Johnny, that is so cool to hear. We really, really do appreciate your commentary. From all of us at Maury's Music, thanks for listening.
Hear you later.
This has been a presentation of Maury's Music, your trusted source for Martin and Blue Ridge guitars. Find us online at maurysmusic.com.